WNYC Studios is supported by Odoo. When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. Good morning, everyone. All right, how many of you stayed up last night to watch the biggest comeback in NBA Finals history after the Knicks were losing by 29 points? Later in the show, we'll play a very viral social media rhyme by a superfan of the Knicks and of the city, and we'll invite you to create a version of it. Have you seen the video of the guy after Game 3 who shouted into a camera in the middle of a crowd, "My mayor Muslim, my bagel's Jewish, my Christian Dior, Knicks in 4. Well, they didn't win the series in 4 games, but they can still win it in 5. My mayor Muslim, my bagel's Jewish, my Christian Dior, Knicks in 4. It went so viral. So here's the way you can play, folks, if you're into it. Come up with a rhyme that ends with the words Knicks in 5. Again, since the Knicks could win the championship in 5 games now, come up with a rhyme that ends with the word Knicks in 5 and get ready to call in with it at around 11:45 this morning. We'll do this around the last 15 minutes of the show. My mayor is socialist. Here's an example. I made this up. My mayor is socialist. My tech firms are brocialist. My watch party's my hive. Knicks in 5. Or maybe my city loves humor. Might be souring on Schumer. Brunson and Kat bring us alive. Knicks in 5. Want one more? You're for Zoran and Daria Lisa, but today you can even love Sliwa because the city's unified and alive with the hopes of Knicks in 5. Something like that. Pretty silly, right? But there are some samples. Now breathe your own creativity into it and get ready to call in with it at the end of the show. A little rhyme, the cheers on the team and the city, ending with the words Knicks in 5. I know you all are creative. You've shown it so many times on this show, and you're going to kill it. So go to your notepads and write, and come back at around 12 o'clock. Now, I wonder these days how many of you will just ask ChatGPT or Claude or some other AI tool to write this for you. Don't do that. You don't have to strive to rhyme Knicks in 5. It just takes a few clicks to rhyme Knicks in 6. Here's a recent Wall Street Journal headline kind of to that effect. It says, your work team is now a pod and your coworkers are AI agents. Your work team is now a pod and your coworkers are AI agents. But here's another headline from the same reporter who's going to join us in a sec. And this is for those of you who assume AI is only going to destroy jobs. This headline is from Tuesday. Manhattan's red-hot office market poised for its best year since 2000. And the article starts with, the hot Manhattan office market is on pace this year for its best leasing performance since 2000. Back then, .com startups helped fuel demand. This time around, it's AI. But wait, if AI is supposed to be, the alien that'll devour everybody's job, why is it causing companies to set up shop in office spaces at the fastest rate since the Knicks were led by Patrick Ewing? Let's talk about that and other reporting by our guest, the Wall Street Journal's Isabelle Bousquette. She covers AI and the various ways it is transforming business, culture, and society. Isabelle, thanks for coming on. Welcome to WNYC.
Thank you so much for having me.
So how hot is Manhattan's office market? Give us some numbers that give us a clue.
Yeah, you could say it's hotter than the Knicks. AI companies leased 1 million square feet of Manhattan office space just in the first quarter of this year. That's a huge uptick from last year. That's more than they leased in all of 2025. We're seeing some pretty big leases. OpenAI and Anthropic have OpenAI has 90,000 square feet in Soho at the Puck Building. Anthropic, we hear is nearing a deal for 500,000 square feet in the Hudson Square area.
Which happens to be where WNYC is, by the way. So I guess the cost of lunch out is about to go up. But go ahead.
Yeah, 100%. These startups love sort of the trendy downtown vibe. But yeah, I mean, they are rushing into New York City. They want to be close to their customers. They want to sell to the big finance companies and law firms and consultancies that are here. And they're really excited about that in-office presence. So we're seeing a huge boom there.
But wait, wasn't it just a couple of years ago that economists were talking about the New York City doom loop, where, to remind people of that phrase, remote work and companies leaving the city were going to decimate the tax base, causing a reduction in city services and therefore quality of life. So then more businesses would leave, taking even more tax money, causing even more reductions in services, and on down the doom scroll rabbit hole.
It's really interesting to see the way the tech industry at least, has done this complete 180 on remote work. The AI companies and the tech companies that I talk to in this city, a lot of them have a 5-day in-office mandate, which is more than we have. And they don't even need the mandate in a lot of ways. These people, they want to come into the office. There's so much excitement around the AI industry and what they're building and what they're creating. And they all want to get there and do it in person together. So yeah, I mean, these folks are grinding away in the office 5 days a week, sometimes 6, 7 days a week. They're there late at night. They're ordering pizzas. I have to say, some of these offices are pretty nice and have some pretty well-stocked kitchens and bar areas and amenities. So that probably helps a little bit as well. But yeah, we are seeing a huge focus on in-person work here.
I would guess a lot of 20-somethings who maybe felt so isolated the way they were locked down during COVID, and what you just described with putting in all these amenities. It does remind me of the late 90s when Google was putting free food in buffets around the office and ping pong tables and all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely seen a ping pong table or two lately. Really decadent restaurants. I mean, it's not just tech. I mean, look at the new JP Morgan headquarters and, the bars and restaurants and endless shopping there. I mean, it kind of reminds you of an airport terminal even. There's an idea that you want to make these offices beautiful places to be. I think for the startups as well, there's an element of having an in-person office, and being in the in-person office gives them a sense of legitimacy. A lot of the reason these companies are in New York is because they want to sell to, again, like the big enterprises in New York, and they want to invite clients into the office, clients who may be wary of, just a small new AI startup, and show them, we're here, we're real, we have an office, we are grinding, we are a legitimate company, and you can trust us. So I think that's another part of it. So
now the city comptroller's office has a webpage called Doom Loop or Boom Loop. So if we're in a Manhattan office boom loop, Isabelle, how much is it because of AI?
Yeah, it's not, AI is still a small percentage of overall commercial leasing in the city. I think last year it was probably 2%. And if we, go with the .com comparison and we look back to, the first quarter of 2000, it was bigger than that. It was closer to a quarter. And some of those tech companies were, there was almost more tech leasing than leasing by finance companies. So it's still modest now, I would say, in New York. But it's growing fast.
And why New York? I mean, supposedly the election of New York's tax the uber rich mayor is going to be causing businesses to flee to Texas, and start rooting for the San Antonio Spurs instead of the Knicks, or to Palm Beach in the billionaire-friendly arms of Mar-a-Lago and Ron DeSantis. So why New York?
Yeah, I think for the AI companies in particular, AI is a little different from previous waves of technology that were more consumer focused, because I think AI has a lot of applications for the business world. So a lot of the AI companies here are developing AI solutions that are meant to be used by lawyers, or AI solutions that are meant to be used by bankers, or AI solutions that are meant to be used by real estate agents and things like that. And so I think like they come to New York because they want to be face to face with the big enterprises, the big companies that are here to, show them how this stuff works in person and really sell them on it. I think there's, probably more there's more activity in San Francisco. I think that's still the city where leasing by AI startups represents, the lion's share. But, the companies that are working on what they call applied AI, or, the applications of AI for business, they want to be here in New York because that's where all their customers are.
And this has been true for a long time. For listeners who don't know, yes, San Francisco, really Silicon Valley, has been the number one center for tech jobs, obviously, since the beginning of, what we consider the modern tech era. But New York has been number two for a long time, right?
Yeah. It's really interesting to think about New York's tech industry and the tech industry in the Bay Area. And I think, both were hit by COVID. I think, what I hear is that the West Coast and the Bay Area was maybe hit a little harder by COVID in terms of remote work. Maybe it took a little bit longer to bounce back, whereas, New York is seeing a huge influx of, AI companies both being started here and moving here, a huge influx of venture capital activity. And I think in San Francisco, you have all the AI companies that are building solutions, but you have fewer of the customers buying them. And I think when a lot of companies start in San Francisco, and then I think they'll move here, or they'll open a second office here. And I think, again, it's because they want to start selling into major customers, and New York is still in many places the go-to place to do that.
Yeah, it was Silicon Valley, and then people used to say, and Boston is emerging as the number two, or Charlotte, or wherever, these new hubs, Pittsburgh. But really, New York quickly became number two and has been there right behind Silicon Valley for a long time. And now, from a New York perspective, very encouraging, if people think this is a good thing, that AI companies, if there have to be AI companies, that they're locating here. Listeners, help us and help Isabelle Bousquette from the Wall Street Journal report these stories. If you work in real estate or with an AI or other company that is currently expanding into more office space in Manhattan, tell us a little bit of your story. 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692. What company are you with? Where are they renting? What's the vision of possibilities, meaning the number of jobs they think they might create? Same thing if you work in commercial real estate. From that end of the deal, you're really well positioned to help report this story. What happened to the doom loop? Who's fueling this boom loop? People who work in commercial real estate. 212-433-WNYC. Call or text 212-433-9692. And we're going to get to another major story of Isabelle's from just recently, and you can help us report that too. The one called Your Work Team is Now a Pod and Your Co-Workers Are AI Agents. I mentioned it in the intro. Your work team is now a pod and your co-workers are AI agents. Are you being put on a team with robots? I'm asking that question literally. Tell us how, and how you're integrating, how it's working out. Do you say thank you after a robot performs a task? I almost did it with a customer service AI agent on the phone the other day. So, would you like me to connect you to blah, blah, blah? And I almost said, yes, thank you. But then I realized, wait, I'm talking to a robot. So I just said yes. Do you go out for beers or coffee together after work? 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692. Call or text, or just with any questions on these things for Isabelle Bousquette, who covers AI and society for the Wall Street Journal. Questions always welcome. Today on the Manhattan office market, or working side by side with AI agents, 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692. While some calls are coming in, I will note another headline of yours from April, Isabel, relating to the office market. Why AI startup offices in New York City are flashy, but mostly empty. And that article says AI firms are rushing to grab Manhattan's most coveted office space, but desks outnumber employees. Desks outnumber employees. So take us further into that. How big is that gap between desks and humans who work at them?
Yeah, this is a really interesting dynamic because these are some of the fastest growing companies out there right now, and they want office space for all the reasons we talked about, but a lot of them are thinking about big hiring plans this year. They want to double, triple, quadruple in terms of headcount in the next 12 months, and so they're thinking about, well, what's the size of office I might need in 2 years if this is a 2-year lease term and they're renting offices that big, even if they only have 1 or 2 people that work there today. I think the craziest example I found of this was, this one company in this beautiful 3,000 square foot Soho loft space. It's almost $30,000 a month. And this founder, signed a 12-month lease when the company was just him and one other person. And, I went there and it was so beautiful, but there were only like 4 or 5 people working. And I was just so fascinated by this idea that, they have all this space because, they're well funded, they're well capitalized, they can spend on it. Again, they're spending all this time in the office, so they want to do it, in a beautiful space surrounded by, couches and the Xbox and pretty plants and things like that. So, yeah, on one hand, I think it's, there's, they have the money and they want to rent big spaces because they can. And then on the other hand, I think they're planning for future growth and they are hiring like crazy. There's one legal AI startup called Harvey in the city. And I went to their office, and the first thing the receptionist said to me was, "Oh, are you a new hire?" And it was a day when there were just so many, a dozen new hires coming through the door. So, yeah, I think they opened their first New York office in 2024, and they had 36 people here at the time. Now they have more than 300, and they just signed a new lease for 185,000 square feet at 1 Madison. So, yeah, it's an interesting dynamic because, some of the offices do feel quite empty, but they say they're going to grow. And on some level, I do believe it because, we've seen that happen.
And we should say you do report also on the risk that this is like the late 90s .com office boom, which of course led to the .com bust when that speculative bubble burst because it was so speculative. Sounds kind of like what you're describing now. So what's the parallel scenario that may come from this?
Yeah, it's pretty hard to ignore that parallel, I think. These companies are, they're leasing spaces way beyond their headcount. In some cases, they're prioritizing scale and market share over immediate profits. That said, I think it's not totally analogous. I think there are some clear differences. One is that I think landlords learn their lesson a little bit the first time around. They're putting a lot of scrutiny on the companies they lease to. They want to look over their business plans, their financials, their, cash flow, income statements, things like that. And, they're thinking about, am I going to give this lease almost as, would I invest in this company? And I think the other difference is these businesses, while there is, some element of just, growing a little beyond their bridges, they do have real customers. I think AI has moved fast into deployment into the enterprise. The big companies out there are spending like crazy on it. We hear, Fortune 100 CEOs talking about this all the time. So there is money going towards them. That said, again, I think there's probably room for some consolidation and, some companies might make it and some companies might not. But yeah, it'll be interesting.
You know, it's popping a little bit on the phones in our text thread of all things. My little reference to not thanking the AI robot
Oh,
on the
really?
phone.
Yeah.
Listener writes, I'll read one example. Here's a text. Brian, with 3 exclamation points. Of course you should thank your robot coworkers. You want them to spare you when the robot overlords take over.
That's
Writes
so funny. Yeah.
Aaron and Nyack. Esteban in Brooklyn, you're on WNYC. Hi, Esteban.
Hi, Brian. I'm just calling to ask what percent of this boom in office spaces is due to the proliferation of co-working spaces, which seem, we began with WeWork, Industrious, IWG, The Yard. There's a million of them convene. They're popping up everywhere. So is that a contributing factor?
Really interesting question, especially because WeWork is seen as a failure. This idea that a space could open that's, renting a few desks here, a few desks there, in their big open space, to startups that only have a few employees. But I think we consider WeWork something that failed, but Isabelle, fill us in.
Yeah. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I will say a lot of startups I talk to start out in a WeWork or similar co-working type space. And then once they've been there for 6 months or so, they, look for a formal office from there. So I think it's definitely a really popular mode for AI companies to start out. I think after that, they want to sort of grow and, plant seeds in their own space. But, and another interesting phenomenon is, we were talking about how some of these startups have office spaces that are way bigger than their current headcounts. Sometimes they'll share it with other AI startups. Sometimes they'll charge for it and sometimes they won't, and it'll just be more casual. But we are just seeing these, sort of people just want to get out there and they want to work in person and they're happy to do it together.
Co-working lives. All these stories seem to imply, I guess I'd call it the big question, which I guess we can't answer yet, of how much AI is going to create jobs or destroy jobs. Some people argue it will create jobs in net numbers, but that's not the narrative that we usually hear. So how valid are the predictions that you're seeing as a reporter on this beat in either direction?
I ask myself this question every single day. This is the question. We hear AI will create jobs and it will destroy jobs. I think there's so much nuance on both sides of that. Are people losing their jobs to AI? Yeah, I think so. One example is call centers. Call centers are getting hugely automated. If you are someone who answered phone calls at a call center, now that job can be done by a robot, and you might be at a company that wants to invest in you and upskill you. They love the word upskill for another job, or you might be out of luck. So we are seeing that. On the other hand, when we see these sort of like mass layoffs happening across big corporations, and we hear the CEO saying we're leaning into AI efficiencies. I think there's an element of that is just sort of trying to use AI to cover up the fact that they're doing layoffs for other reasons. I think no company out there is so successful with AI that they can do a mass layoff and lose, 10 or 14% of their workforce at this point. I think that's just a myth.
In a minute, I want to move this conversation, which is kind of a segue from what you just said, to your other recent story. Your work team is now a pod and your coworkers are AI agents. But one more on this that you say you ask yourself every day about net creation of jobs or net destruction of jobs. Here's a really scary version of that, as described in a National Review article recently. I'm going to read from the lead paragraph. Dario Amodei, CEO of Anthropic, predicts that AI will displace half of all entry-level white-collar jobs. Jeffrey Hinton, the, quote, godfather of AI, warns of massive unemployment. Bill Gates believes that AI will make most jobs obsolete. Even Elon Musk thinks that work will eventually become optional, unquote. How much consensus is there on things like that? I guess you were just answering that question to some degree. But the Elon Musk quote at the end of that was really intriguing to me, that work will eventually become optional. That by itself doesn't account for, how people not working pay the rent and put food on the table. So is this the Andrew Yang government provides a guaranteed universal income scenario, or something more depressing, if you know?
Yeah. I mean, to answer your question, I don't think there's any consensus at this point. And yeah, you have that far out view that AI will literally automate everything that every person does in the economy, and it'll, digitally do all white collar jobs, and in the form of physical robots, it'll do all blue collar jobs, and there will be nothing left for humans to do, and we'll all sort of live in this universal basic income utopia and make art and be creative. I don't know. We've seen other technological revolutions in the past. We can debate about how, analogous this is or isn't to those. But, the Industrial Revolution, for example, people moved on to other jobs. People moved on to other different kinds of work. And I think that's a large part of the argument we're seeing today is, jobs have to change. If AI can do, basic busy work, if AI can do a lot of that sort of first draft of writing software apps, that's maybe not a good use of people's time anymore. And, I do think that there is a massive change that's coming for the workforce, but I don't think we know exactly what it looks like yet, and I do think it'll be messy to try to figure it out.
Well, here's a jobs are going to change question from a listener. A listener writes, please forgive my ignorance, but I'm curious about what the AI in-office workers do. Is it marketing and sales-oriented work, and how will it grow to have more real humans in office?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything. I think these AI companies, every person who works at the company is there, whether it's the CEO and the founder, the C-suite, they're doing marketing, business development, they're managing their financial operations. One big role that we're seeing emerging as we talk about, the jobs AI is creating, this might be one example, but they have something called forward deployed engineers, which is this it's new, but it's not new, but it's getting more popular now. This idea that you have an engineer that will embed with your customers and help sort of customize and build your AI products to really suit those customer needs. So there's this AI for financial services company called Hebia, for example. Like, they are hiring so many former bankers and private equity folks to come work for them, and they're calling them forward deployed bankers, and their job is to act as the go-between, sort of like big financial services stalwarts, and help them understand how to better use these cutting-edge AI tools.
And believe it or not, they're still coming in on thanking the AI customer service bots. I'll read one more. I always thank the robots. I like to stay in the habit of being kind. What if I then start to forget to thank the people around me? Writes Aided in New Jersey. So we'll put a pin in that topic for the moment. And when we come back from a break, we'll continue with Isabelle Bousquette from the Wall Street Journal. And we'll pivot to the ideas in her story. Your work team is now a pod, and your co-workers are AI agents. Stay with us. Brian Lehrer on WNYC with Isabelle Bousquette, who covers AI, not just AI in business, also AI in society and culture for the Wall Street Journal. And you at 212-433-WNYC, call or text. So yeah, now I want to ask you about your article. Your work team is now a pod, and your co-workers are AI agents. What's the premise of that story?
Yeah, a few things. One is that AI agents are increasingly being treated as members of the workforce, um, and jobs are increasingly transforming such that you may no longer be doing the work that you were traditionally doing, but you are managing an agent or a team of AI agents that are doing that work. So as a result, teams are getting smaller and smaller than they used to be. I should say, when I was reporting this story, most of the focus was on software engineering teams specifically. And I think a lot of what we see in software is sort of an early example of what we could maybe see in other types of functions. And it's starting there because building software is something AI is very, very good at right now. It's one of the early killer use cases. So we're seeing a lot of disruption in these teams that were doing software development, and what used to maybe take a team of 15 people can now be done actually faster, maybe by a team of 2, 3, 4 people, and each of those people is managing their own AI agents.
People, by the way, may be confused by the word agents there, AI agents. How are you in the industry using that word?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's such an industry buzzword at this point, and honestly, I think the industry really lacks a consensus on actually what it means. But the core idea of an AI agent is it's something more than a chatbot. A chatbot like ChatGPT, you talk to it, you ask it a question, it gives you an answer back, you can have a conversation. An AI agent takes things further by taking some kind of action on your behalf. So you could tell an agent, go look up this data for me in this database, and then double check it with these requirements, and then build this software application, and then test the software application to make sure there are no bugs in it, and then just let me know when you're done. And it can go off and do work for, several hours. And then, it'll come back to you if it gets stuck or if it has a question, or it'll come back to you when it's done.
And so you're right. Companies are restructuring engineering teams into smaller, more nimble, cross-functional pods made up of humans and AI agents. I guess you just gave us one example. Is this a good example? You had a story called Inside BlackRock's AI Transformation, and it says BlackRock engineering chief Nish Ajitsaria envisions a future where AI agents handle most processes and humans work in smaller squads, use the word squads, to oversee them. Isabelle, at least that makes clear that the humans are overseeing the AI agents, not the other way around. But maybe take us inside BlackRock a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it is really interesting. And I think, BlackRock is a company that is using AI a lot and has for a long time, but hasn't yet. And I don't think anyone has yet really exactly figured out how to execute on sort of the workforce transformation. So a lot of what they're doing at BlackRock is, it's similar to what we see at other firms, which is a focus on productivity tools and giving individuals the ability to build AI agents that can manage parts of their job and then oversee those agents. So, they have a new platform that is going to enable, anyone at the company to go onto this platform and build an agent that can do a part of your job and then run that and then share that throughout the company with other people who might want to use it. So I think that's sort of emblematic of what we're seeing across the industry. It's this early phase where everyone is starting to, on an individual level, experiment with AI and get more productive with AI. I think the question then becomes, once everyone at the company is automating parts of their job and using AI agents, What do they do with all that extra free time? And how do you direct them on what to do with it? And how do you, consolidate teams? If people are so much more productive, teams can get smaller and they will get smaller. And that's what we hear from a lot of CEOs and CTOs. But I think there's some messiness in terms of once the teams get smaller, what do you do with the other people? And I think that's where the question of layoffs comes in. And,
Right.
there's a lot of talk about upskilling and reskilling them. And I hear the term higher order work or higher level work all the time. And that's what people are going to be promoted into. But it's still quite vague what that means. So I don't think we really know yet.
Couple of rhymes coming in. I'll just share them with you. People who are chiming in with these loving New York and the Knicks rhymes in advance of our segment in about an hour. One says, now other things are coming in about AI, and they're blanking off my screen. Sorry. Where did it go? Here it is. It says, my old man watched with me, but didn't see Ananobi. It's good to be alive, Nixon 5. Another one says, when I shave, here it is. When I shave, I fear a nick. At Christmas, I jeer Saint Nick. The bread I bake is always leaven. I predict it will be the Spurs in 7. Ooh,
Oh, no.
to that person.
That's a brutal ending.
Regina on Staten Island. Back to the serious stuff. You're on WNYC. Hi, Regina.
Hi there. How are you? My ears perked up at this discussion when you said that Elon Musk said there may not be a need for work anymore in the future. And so this is either a question or a comment. Can AI help cure homelessness? Can they, feed the hungry? Can they be in relational types jobs where we need people to be with elderly people and so on? I mean, I would love to see if AI could do something about homelessness and people on the street, but I would hate to see them work in all these other areas and we still have that problem. That's much more serious to me.
Regina, thank you for such an important question. And take it seriously, Isabelle. Are any companies developing AI tools that can alleviate that kind of extreme inequality that we see in our city as much as we love it, whether the Knicks are winning or losing, and provide other kinds of human services like that, one way or another?
Yeah, this is such a good question because a lot of times we'll see the CEO tech gods get up there and preach that AI is going to solve all of humanity's problems and it's going to solve world hunger and it's going to solve homelessness. And yeah, sure, it might destroy humanity, but, we'll keep a tight lid on the guardrails to make sure that doesn't happen. And, somehow we're going to see all of these benefits and just, don't pay attention to the negatives. There's a lot of potential for AI to be used for good in these instances. I was talking to one governmental department about, can you use AI to make it easier to apply for benefits online? Because some of these applications are so confusing and abstruse. And I think, the government moves slowly in terms of technology adoption for a lot of reasons, a lot of bureaucracy and, they're just not the most technologically savvy. But I think the potential is there for AI to be able to do these things. I think it's more of a question now of how do we apply it and who is building those solutions and how do they get the funding for that and how do they get it into the government and how do they get those solutions used. So I think it's a really good question. It's something to pay attention to. I don't think we're seeing a lot of that yet, but I hope so.
Obviously, so many conversations to come as AI continues to become more prominent. So far, no matter what, the people who want to resist it are saying, for better or worse, we are discussing on such a regular basis what's happening in business and real estate and employment, like today, what's happening with climate as a result, which we talked about on Tuesday's show, and all of these aspects as the AI revolution continues, and people have to figure out how to manage it or banish it, for better or for worse. Isabelle Bousquette covers AI and society for the Wall Street Journal. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you again for having me.